So yes, I am Chris with a K. When I first started in my workplace, that name stuck because I worked with 3 Chris's, and actually since joining Penna, I work with 4. So it's a USP that's followed me through. And I'm the Diversity Inclusion Manager. So my job picks up with organisations to look to transform their culture to ensure that some of the stats that we've seen, we look to retain those individuals that we've worked so hard to recruit.
And hi, I'm Alexis Harris, and I'm a client partner at Penna. So essentially I look at managing and overseeing our clients from a strategic point of view. People in the room might not actually know who Penna are or what we do, so we're actually one of the UK's leading resourcing and communications companies. Actually as well, lucky enough to be part of the Oleeo group. So really why we're here today, we're hoping to take you on a little bit of a journey. Basically we're going to talk about kind of EVP and how diversity and inclusion underpins and underlays everything throughout the employee value proposition, but focusing more so then as well into how, from an attraction point of view, how we can go out there and attract to a diverse audience and engage people in the right way and ensure that obviously when they join a company that they then feel included as well.
Thank you. I have said it might be a bit like a bridesmaids moment. I don't know if anyone's watched the film. Taking the mic on each other. We thought we'd start off with some audience interactions. We won't be as extreme as a fist bump, although that has set the tone. We would like to ask you a question, and it kind of relates to the question that Steve's asked in their questionnaire. I'd like you to put your hands up if you agree that your internal D&I strategy is aligned and embedded with your external EVP and recruitment processes. Quick show of hands.
What?
We've got one. Bro. Okay, so in the stats that Steve showed us, it showed that 32% of UK employers saw D&I embedded in their EVP. And for us, when we look at how does diversity and inclusion impact employer brand, it absolutely underpins everything about your employer brand. It looks at speaking to who you are as an organisation, who you have within your 4 walls, who you look to recruit, who you look to promote, the communities you wish to serve, and ultimately, the type of employer that you want to be. For me, working within D&I and working in an organisation that looks to attract, recruit and retain talent, D&I absolutely should be at the foremost front of your mind when you look at your EVP. We get asked the question around, is it internal or is it external? Now, I've been in D&I for 10 years, and I spent the majority of my time gaining my D&I knowledge, wisdom at Stonewall, the LGBT charity. And I worked with several organisations, predominantly private sector, top 100, top 250, and so often the D&I conversation comes in with the D&I manager and practitioner once you have the population. How can we secure and retain the population of staff that we've got? When actually, those conversations need to be starting a lot earlier. They need to be embedded with the EVP. They need to look at ensuring that your external message doesn't produce this illusion of inclusion, that it doesn't say that D&I is in our DNA, it's at the heart of everything that we do, and yet individuals walk in through the front door and they hear and see something completely different than what they've been sold. For us, D&I and EVP sit hand in hand and should absolutely balance each other out.
Fab. So when we talk about the internal and the external brand, so the EVP, I'm going to use the word audience quite a lot. When I use that, I mean both sides, internal and external. The thing that essentially underpins everything, and the most important thing, not just from a business perspective, but from a diversity and inclusion perspective as well, is the people. People are, without a doubt, the most important asset to any business, and hopefully everyone in the room can agree with that. Your people talk about, or they show who you are as a business and what you stand for. And so when we talk about EVP, we're essentially talking to your people from an internal point of view and an external point of view when you're attracting and you're trying to retain talent as well. It's those who currently work there and it's those who don't yet work there. So how do you appeal to both of those audiences? And we want to always look to create a clear message, and so basically speak to people and find out, why would you want to join this organisation? And then speak to the people internally and say, why do you want to stay there? So just take a second and think about your own business. If you know it, think about your current EVP, your employee value proposition. Think about what made you join the company that you're currently in. And obviously you're still there, so what's made you stay there? We talk about pillars a lot when we discuss employee value proposition, and basically these are, what we mean by that is these are the themes and the attributes and the sentiments and everything that makes a company what it is. And diversity and inclusion essentially sits across every single one of your pillars. And EVP, as we've mentioned a few times, is not just about the people internally, the employer brand internally, but it's about the message that we're putting out there as well. D&I basically sits across everything that we do from an internal and external point of view. And we'll keep kind of mentioning this, you'll see a theme going on here, but it's just really, really important to make sure that that message is clear, that when we're talking about branding, it's not just one or the other, and we're talking about attraction, that's exactly the same as well. So I'm going to just talk you through a little bit of an example and a case study of where we've kind of put this into practice, just to kind of show you what we mean when we're talking about EVP and D&I. So we work with DSTL. I don't know if anybody has heard of DSTL before. Very important company, they're Defence Science Technology Lab. They're part of the MOD, and basically they ensure that innovative science and technology contributes to defence and security within the UK, so very, very important. They currently have some of the brightest minds in the UK within their company, very heavily focused within the STEM sector. So having those people internally, they want to ensure that they're also attracting the brightest minds as well. But that's the brightest minds, no matter what your background, no matter where you come from, it's all about the mindset and making sure that you can do the job, but they want to make sure they're diverse across the board. So when we started working with them, the main challenges were raising their profile within what is a very competitive market and ensuring that they're, again, taking on the best talent, but that they're getting that diversity to ensure that internally they're inclusive as well. We wanted to look at what makes them unique, and so on the screen there, that's actually their people statement. So when we look at developing an EVP, we always have the people statement at the forefront of our mind to make sure that we're creating something that, again, is true to who they are as a business. We speak externally to the business, talking about celebrating what happens internally and making sure when people join, they want to stay. So to sum it all up, when we kind of came up with their EVP, we looked at, for DSTL, become the unexpected. So we loved this because it kind of acted as an invitation. It was kind of a rallying call. It was exciting, clear, no nonsense, and basically just made people think that they can achieve great things if they join DSTL. It provoked intrigue, kind of makes you ask why. Become the unexpected, what does that actually mean? And it's no nonsense and it's clear. So basically our message is that we want people to feel inspired and compelled and reassured that by joining DSTL, you'll be able to become the unexpected. And whilst you're at DSTL, you will become the unexpected as well. And just here's a couple of examples of how we've kind of utilised this within an external and an internal market as well. So the ones in the middle, this is kind of some creative adverts that we've put out. These are actually for graduate and apprenticeship space. And then around the edge as well, these are some kind of internal snippets. So the really key thing here is that theme is mirrored across both sides of it, the attraction and the retention as well. So we've got a compelling EVP and we want to raise awareness and recruit. How do we go about doing that? So now we're going to talk a lot more about the attraction side. So it sounds really obvious, and I know it's kind of come up a few times as well earlier today, but it's all about knowing and understanding your audience. Diversity in advertising is about creating a mindful campaign that respectfully includes and relates to the right people. We want to make an audience feel either something that is going to be gained that's new and exciting by joining a company, or feel something familiar and comforting when they join as well. So it's about speaking directly to them. Essentially what we're saying is that the audience is the point, and it has squashed the triangles a little bit on there, so they were a bit bigger. But the audience is the point, that's what we're basically making here. So often you see in advertising a focus on telling your audience how great you are, what you do, what your company is, how great it is to work there. But actually that's not the point. The point is about relating directly to the audience that you're talking to on their level and speaking to them as if you care about them. And that will obviously vary depending on your target audience. So how do we do this well? Well, it's all about having an authentic message, and I've heard this mirrored as well in some of the talks that we've had earlier today. Start to think when you're creating an advertising campaign, who is actually involved in that campaign? Are the people sitting around the room who are doing the planning and the production and the creative messaging and the copywriting and everything that goes into an attraction campaign, is your target audience represented within that group? Because often, if it's not, you'll be seen to miss the mark, unintentionally as well. So make sure that the audience that you're trying to reach is represented, and that all kind of links to that inclusivity aspect as well. Think, when you're creating a message, does it truly celebrate what it's actually like to work there? We can all put out the kind of bright, shiny, utopia version of what it's actually like to be a part of an organisation and attracting loads of people, but is that authentic? Because often what will happen is you'll attract in potentially a diverse audience, but they won't feel included and they won't feel inclusive and they won't stay. So it's just all really important about being authentic. And finally, we know that in marketing and attraction, it's all about basically a sense of making your audience feel their life is going to be improved in some way by buying your product, or in this case, by taking on your job. And that is still important, but what's equally as important is that you're not tokenising diversity under a thin veil of inclusivity. That's often really easy to spot when you do that externally. So again, it's just about being aspirational and speaking on the level to the people. And unfortunately, logic doesn't always win in this aspect. So whilst logic should prevail, we know all too well that sometimes the execution isn't always as successful as we expect it to be. Basically what we're saying here is that taking into consideration all of those points that we've talked about, by skipping over some or by not delving as deep into some, by not being as authentic, what could be deemed to be a really good idea with good intent can actually sometimes miss the mark and can land very differently to how you expect it to. So we've got a couple of examples here, and I don't know if anybody recognises any of these or kind of understands where we're coming from in terms of the slight miss of the mark. So just look at the kind of the Pepsi ad one. It's one that's been in the news quite a lot with Kendall Jenner. Obviously, the intent here was good. It was using a message that is big in America, the Black Lives Matter movement. It was trying to kind of utilise this in a way of advertising. Now, what obviously happened is that it actually fell flat. It came across as very tone deaf. I think that was the word that was used quite a lot. And essentially it missed the mark. And if you think of, these are all quite big global brands, if you think of Pepsi as an organisation, I would believe that they are a very diverse organisation. You'd expect them to have a lot of diversity within them, being so large. So if we go back to the point about making sure that people are in the room who are going to be your target audience, were people feeling inclusive there? Did they feel like they could speak up and say, this isn't the right thing to do, this is going to fall flat, this is going to come across as tone deaf? So it just makes you think about making sure that actually, again, that you're being authentic to your message and that you're representing within the message your target audience. What we're going to show you here is basically another DSL example and how we've basically taken their EVP that we've created and used it in a marketing campaign to speak to an audience on a level. So what we can't see here, but what we're talking about here, is we wanted to recruit into their cyber information systems roles. So very, very highly technical, very niche, very specialist. And as we spoke about earlier with the STL, they are in a very competitive market, so they often have to be competing with the larger brands. What we actually did was we created an interactive game for them, an online game called Counter Threat. And what this is basically people go in and they kind of face imaginary threats that the UK might see, and they have to kind of play the game and in a cyberspace, and essentially they get points and they get to a leaderboard. Quite simple in theory. But that wasn't it. What we then did is notice that people who were of the right technical mindset were actually hacking the game, which is what we wanted to happen, but we didn't actually believe it truly would. So basically we were seeing all these scores on the leaderboard, like 50, 60, and then jumping to like 4 million. And basically people were hacking the game and placing themselves right at the top of the leaderboard. So the engagement aspect from that was exactly what we wanted to see. We were attracting and engaging that right mindset. That's exactly who DSTL wanted to hire. But that still wasn't it. What we also then did is we had some hidden code within the back end of the system. Now, I won't pretend I'm technical and I know about that, but yeah, we had some hidden code which essentially, if the people found, they could get cheats, and they could get extra time in the game, and they could get additional resource and things like that. So the idea being that we're exciting an audience, we're showing how fun and innovative DSTL are, and speaking to people on a level. Now, from a social media campaign perspective, again, we can't see it here, but I'll show you some later. We had some really unique and overt messages that we spoke directly to the audience on. So we used Instagram for this, and we had some kind of stats that came up, and basically were speaking directly to you, basically outright saying, it doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, who you are. If you have the right mindset, you will fit in at DSTL. Basically mirroring the EVP and making people know that you can be here to become the unexpected, but just in a really nice, innovative way that basically allowed people to enjoy something, test their talent, but also know that they could fit in within the organisation.
Thank you. So we wanted to talk about how to get started and to understand where you are on your journey. So wherever you are, whether you feature on top employer lists, whether you're starting off your D&I journey, whether you have just learned what D&I is, which I doubt any of you in this room have, we would always say, and it's been mirrored in the speeches before, is look at your data, what data you have. Now, many people will put it aside and say we only have limited data, so it doesn't really tell us anything. But I would encourage you to look and encourage you to create a communications piece that is inclusive, that states why you're asking your staff to declare their protected characteristics. If you're open and honest with them, and you talk about wanting to make this the best place to work for everybody, people will start to fill it out. And to remember that when we look at stats, and this is a true D&I practitioner speaking, when we look at stats, obviously it paints a picture, but behind that stat is an individual with an experience. It's so important to go to your individual groups within an organisation, whether that be your network groups, whether that be your recent hires, and importantly, whether that be the people that are leaving your organisation, to find out and ask them, what was it like for you here? What's your lived experiences? Tell us. We have a network group and we could have an assumption that we feel that it's fine here. But I'm a big believer that regardless of however engaged and empowered you are as a student leaving university, and I'll take my sort of experience, I didn't go to college or university, but I know several friends that did, and for them to feel out and comfortable about their sexual orientation or gender identity, and to say I'm going to walk into that front door and be authentically me. I've seen a message that this organisation is inclusive, and on the interview process their partner's misgendered, no one talks about the LGBT network group, no one talks about inclusivity, people will start to conform to what they see and hear around them. So it's equally important that you not only listen to the lived experiences of individuals within your organisation, that you also bring everyone on a journey. I do have for you slides which looks at regional and global differences. How as an organisation with a global footprint do we blueprint D&I? And my advice to you would be have an overarching strategy that talks about who you are as an employer, what you mean to the communities that you serve, whether it be products or services, but ultimately make that strategy adjustable. When we look at, for example, offices and organisations that have offices in the UK and the Middle East, equality laws vary hugely in those areas. So advocate an opportunity where you can state that wherever you are in this world, when you work under our four walls, that you're protected, that we as an organisation value diversity and inclusivity. We also have got for you, but you will have to come and speak to us, is a diversity inclusion strategy, which starts to look at, and again, wherever you are on your journey, it starts to look at 4 key areas to focus on. The stat that I've got shows to focus on policies and processes. The first thing I would do, while working in an organisation, is think that if someone is looking at your employment policies, they're probably going through a change in their life. Whether that be maternal, whether it be declaring a disability, whether it be looking through the notice period. The first thing I would encourage organisations to do in their policies is ask, are you okay? Why are you looking at your policies? Why do you want to speak to us today? Now, policies underpin a culture within an organisation. When you have nothing else and you have a policy, it shows that you have signed a commitment to treat your staff in a certain way. Some organisations stay truly legal to that, and some start to bend the rules and flex a little. I would say that your policy needs to be lived through your experiences, which is when we talk about supportive culture. So supportive culture isn't just about telling people that we're focusing on females and we're focusing on BAME, for example, and excluding everyone else. It's about educating to individuals why we have a diversity and inclusion strategy, what it means for everyone, how to speak to people respectfully, how to challenge respectfully, and ultimately how to bring everyone on that journey so that their thoughts and values and lived experiences are brought to the table and are heard. So I think that will be us for now.
Could I just ask for a round of applause for